Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender Ed, Blender HD on Twitter. I'm the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you could find at theoryofdfs.com. This week, bringing on, I would consider him an unheralded good DFS player because you don't see the million screenshots. You'll see a screenshot when Alex Len gets a zero, but you don't see much bravado. And you're primarily in the add more funds Slack, which I used to be kind of a part of. Whatever you're there, you're talking to Eric Beimfor. He's not dead, right? He's around, but it's Peter Liu at Boston Eagle 5. You find him on the DFS contest with Boston Eagle 5, and we've known each other. We've never actually talked in real life. We've known each other probably for 4 years or something.
That's when I started playing DFS. Just like everybody else. I was probably grinding the CBS Sports line. Yahoo. Daily fantasy leagues, making $400 or $500 per league, playing 10 of them. And then, somebody at a poker game would tell me, hey, there's something you can make $100,000 in one night instead. It's like, oh, well, if that's the case, instead of, grinding out, which reliever is going to get saves the next morning or, which starting pitcher might have a good matchup. I was like, why not, give this a shot? You start and just like everybody, you lose. It's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to play anymore, But then, I think New York banned it, I think in 2015 or 2016. And so I guess that gave me a reset. And so that's when I started playing for real in 2017 when things became legal again.
Okay, so you're in New York.
Oh yeah, I'm in New York. Yes.
Okay, so it has those weird conditions like they have to approve new sports or something. It's one of those like you can't play college basketball, but you could play a certain other sport. I came in during like it's weird for me to say that I started playing after Ethangate. Like you're a little bit past that.
I remember reading about it, but yes, I wasn't playing during
Right.
Ethangate. Yes, I definitely.
But I wasn't playing at all. I found out about DFS through that, so it's kind of weird. Big scandal that turned out to be nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, oh, okay, there is it's more similar to poker. It's more it's game theory oriented and not just. I heard the commercials every once in a while because I only watch soccer, so they didn't advertise on NBC Sports or any of the soccer stuff, and so I really didn't. I heard it on some podcasts, but I just thought it was like, I used to play rotisserie baseball. The Sporting News had like a fantasy competition. Pick out the couple of guys with the salary and send mail in, and maybe someone wins $1 million. And I'm like there's no strategy.
Exactly,
stuff like that. So then once I saw that, you're playing against other people, and there's something more than just I know sports to this, and that's when I started playing. But do you think that, just like you said, you came over from your Yahoo leagues, your CBS Sports Line leagues, and then you start playing DFS and you go, I know sports.
Yeah,
like I should do well, and then you don't.
Exactly. Yep. No, exactly. That's exactly what it was. It's like, well, I know who's good. It's like, I know Albert Pujols. I know Brian Giles. That's the guys who I was playing daily. Back when I was playing Yahoo leagues, and I was like, I know who's good. These guys probably don't know anything. These guys are probably noobs, just like in every other thing. And then you realize that the game isn't really about knowing sports. I mean, I guess you do have to know a little bit. You can watch to help you along. But the game is actually more about, just like you said, it's about poker. It's about game theory. It's about understanding what others are trying to do and how do you leverage yourself against that, And I guess that's the one thing that helped me propel myself to become a better player, because I didn't learn that lesson probably until maybe 2 years ago, So the first 2 years I was just throwing away money by, hey, I know how to pick, which set of players, and I filled my salary cap. That was the first thing I always did too. Hey, I'm going to always fill my salary cap because that seems smart. Why would I ever leave money? And then you understand the other aspects of the games that, nobody actually teaches you, in those, when you first read articles about, the game.
Right. I remember participating in the Add More Fun Slack, and I'm the one, like, you were there, and I'm the one that comes across like an idiot.
Yeah,
right. I'm the one that's like I'm gonna play this team. I'm gonna stack this team and that team and fade that, and like, what are you doing? Like, you're not playing the high probability, like the no-brainer stuff. And I'm like, dude, this shit's random. Like, it's much more random than you think. And if people are underestimating people, just like in MMA, this past weekend, I played a bunch of like the biggest underdog on the slate because it's a heavyweight fight. The guy's coming back from 5 years without a fight. Okay? But heavyweight fights, I don't know if you, Peter, do you play MMA DFS?
I don't play it because I'm not good enough at it. But I mean, I watch it and I understand heavyweights get knocked out. You know,
right, one punch, right? Like it doesn't matter who's the favorite.
Yeah.
Like you make one mistake and you're dead. And this and he hasn't fought in 5 years or 4.5 years. It's like that could be a bad thing. Most people treated it as a bad thing. Of like this guy had fights canceled, right? He may not be. He made weight. But they're like, and he wasn't even that good of a heavyweight like 5 years ago. So it's like, well, the Castro is going to crush Dan Ho, and he's a minus 335 favorite. And it's like minus 335 is not minus 335. Well, you're not even a 90% favorite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And this guy, this underdog's going to be owned at like 5 to 7%. And I'm like, based on the probability, and the underdog is under 7K. I mean, like. It's like, dude, if this guy wins, he's in the optimal. I mean, like, there's no way for him not to be in the optimal at 6,800 with a knockout at his price, and he's owned under his win probability. So why? Tell me why I shouldn't take the. Well, he hasn't fought. Well, who knows? 4.5 years, maybe he's Superman now. Who knows?
Well, exactly, and I think that's the difficult part, and that's why I like listening to your podcast. I'm on it now, but it's that people. It's not that people don't understand the math. Obviously, people understand the math.
Well, I think some people don't understand. I think some people don't understand the math.
I guess I might be giving too much, people too much credit. I guess that's true. But the people who do understand the math, it's still very difficult for them to say, hey, this guy's a minus 400 favorite. Why am I playing 40% of my lineups against this guy? It's very. I think Cheese was on last week and he was discussing about this too. I think there's a certain mental block when it comes to actually putting your money on the line, and I think that's I guess I wouldn't say it's the biggest, but it's one of the biggest obstacles for somebody to become a better player, where they have to understand it's sort of like poker where you're jamming it all in on a flush draw, even though you have the right odds, but you have to have the, like the idea that this is what I should be doing. And, the money doesn't actually matter until we see the outcome. I think
you see the outcome in a large sample size. You jam in on what in poker, like your example is like, let's say there's one card to come. Let's just say there's one card to come. It's like a little over 4-1 for you to hit your flush. And you're jamming as a bet because you're now combining the 4-1 odds of you hitting plus the fold equity.
Yep.
Right? Because remember, like you have to figure if I get his range of hands correctly, my opponent, like maybe I estimate that he'll fold 20% of the. If I estimate he'll fold 50% of the time.
Yeah.
And then and there's $800 in the pot, and my jam is for $600. Like. And if he's going to fold half the time, like I should, that's what I should be doing. That's what I should be doing. If this specific hand, he folds or he calls, and if he calls and it gets made, it doesn't like at the result as of this point, whatever happens after that, you were positive expected value.
Yep.
So as long as you continue to make those plus EV decisions,
now
the problem comes in if that's your last $600 and you're homeless.
Yes.
Now we start talking into risk. Now we're talking about risk management.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, do you want to? It's a very similar thing in a poker tournament to like, do you want to be all in on the first hand? Like you can't win the tournament. In the first hand. So are you more the getting from 10,000 to 20,000 in chips in a 1,500 person tournament? Doesn't mean all that much. Should you be now? You may be in a spot where you're 90-10, but like should you be looking for those spots? Like maybe not because your risk of but you have to weigh that. But so many people, you say it's a mental block with the money on the line. I think it's more of a mental block with short term thinking. Like that,
Yes,
the
could be
fact
it too. Yes.
that especially in baseball, high variance.
Yes. Yes.
Where, well, you know me, there's a cheap stack out there. I most likely
Yeah.
have it. Uh,
Tonight probably the Tigers. That's
right, I
just.
right. Yesterday was the Marlins. Yeah, of course,
Yep.
right. Uh, Adam Duvall was only 3% owned on FanDuel. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe
hmm
it, and I had like
Yeah, he was like 2.4.
27%
Yeah.
of them. Right? No, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get that. I mean, I made profit, but I didn't
hmm
get the first.
Yep.
But just the fact of like my whole DFS career is not dependent on like this one slate. Like
Yep.
today's slate, in the grand scheme of things, is like one hand of poker when playing a session of 900 hands. So
Yep.
the outcome of one hand of poker, like mentally, I don't treat it as like, oh my god, if I lose this hand, I'm never gonna make that decision ever again. But you see that in DFS. So
Yes.
how do you said like until like 2 years ago,
hmm
you may not have been playing all that well. Like how did you transition from like it? I call it nonlinear thinking. Like
Okay.
it's kind of like probabilistic thinking, nonlinear
hmm
thinking, where it's like I'm gonna try to make the best decisions today, and then just like detach the results of one slate from it. But I mean, I'm not detaching the results. I'm looking at my results over the course of a season.
Yep.
Like then, if it's like if I played 180 slates and I'm like, wow, maybe I made a lot of bad decisions because I lost a lot of money this season, then I could do that. But the same thing in poker of like if you've been losing money at poker for a year straight playing every day, like there has to be things you're doing wrong. But in the
Exactly. Yeah.
course of one hand, like
hmm
you can't judge that. You can't like, oh, what was the correct decision? I view it the analogy I give in poker is it seems like so many people like that flush draw example.
hmm
People are, and that's why they get annoyed with my answers, right? Because that what I view it is that they're asking me instead of should you're talking about should you jam with the flush draw, and it's like if we played this slate out a thousand times, a hand thousand times, will I show a positive return? Will I make money with this decision? And the
hmm
answer would be yes. So I do it. But so many people are asking is, do you think a heart's coming out on the river?
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
it's
They're asking the wrong
I know
question.
it's about 4.1 to one, but like on this
You don't
specific
know.
hand, how the
Yeah.
fuck am I supposed to know?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Going back to your question, I was charting. I think I've said this in a tweet before, but I think one of the most important things you should be doing if you're going to do this, even as a hobby, I say hobby is probably if you're playing like $50 a night, but you're playing every night, you should always chart your results. I think charting your results is very, very important. It doesn't have to be, to a T, every single thing you're trying to chart down, but you should chart your results and what you're doing well in and, what type of lineups the better players are doing in. I know you did that. I did that when I first started too, because it's like, you see Osmo at the top of every standing. Why would you not try to copy his lineups? You can't copy his lineups to a T, but you can copy his concepts and what he's trying to do. That's how I learned about stacking, because at first I wasn't stacking in baseball either.
You
I was
weren't
just
stacking
picking.
in baseball even when you started?
No, and
Oh
that's
yeah,
what I
now
mean.
you were throwing money away.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then just a couple of years ago, that's it's funny, now I'm very, very into the Add More Fun Slack, but Add More Fun first started as a tool. It actually started as a tool. I was one of those nerds who was like, hey, this is the X-Boba versus curveballs. This was the X-Boba versus splitters. Let me try to dig who's going to hit a home run because, he hits splitters well and this guy and then I think they opened their Slack just, first started, and that's how I got into it. And I started talking to people there. I think Eric was one of the first people who I talked to, and they were like, well, this doesn't matter on a daily basis anymore. It's a daily fantasy game, but it's your results matter only at the end of the year. If you win a tournament on day one and you lose the rest of the year, you're still probably going to be profitable. So it doesn't matter if you lose 159 slates, and I think poker really helped with that because poker is the same thing. You lose one night, you lose, 4 nights, maybe 5 nights in a row. It's okay as long as you make profit on the 6th night. And I think that concept, once talking to Eric, I figured out that, hey, this is what you should be treating daily fantasy as and so instead of treating it as, oh, I had a losing month, you would chart all your results for the year and then you put them all together. And even then, I think 2 years ago, I was still a break-even player. I didn't have a big winning season until last year. COVID is pretty funny, but I think that's the thing that people need to understand. And I get guest, that they need to chart their results, in my opinion. And once you chart your results, you can see where your improvement is at. And just like your poker thing, if you're losing 6 months in a row, you need to figure out what's making you lose and how to improve that if you want to be a profitable player. If you're trying to have fun, you're just trying to have fun. But I personally believe that everybody's trying to have fun until you lose money, and then you're trying to make money.
But you said you were looking into a lot of the stuff. I did that also when I started playing. When I moved from soccer into my next sport was baseball. I started in 2016 in MLB, and I tried to do the very similar thing of like I'm going to analyze. I'm saying pitch effects data and all that type of stuff, and I spent so much time to get at the end to realize that it doesn't matter. Like I learned. I mean, it's not like I just woke up and it's just like nothing matters. I'm the nihilistic DFS player of like anything you look at doesn't matter. It's 4 at bats. Who cares, right? Right? Life is meaningless. To play whoever you want. Nothing matters, other than what your opponents are playing. That matters.
Yes.
I did the same thing, but every time I would dig into stats. Now I come from an analytics background. I was a computer programmer. I know the statistical concepts, the math, the poker. I mean, I came from that. And then I would just analyze all this data and go, like, this is not predictive. Like, it seems like if you think about it, go, well, if I knew who did this, even if he's 5% more likely to hit a home run, or then that's an edge or something, and I just look and I go, none of this is predictive. And then I look at stuff that people talk about, and I go, it's predictive, but like this, it's this much predictive, very minimally, but people treat it like it's this predictive. Like, yes. So it's like to me, that was the light bulb of once I find out, especially in baseball where there's a lot of stats, once you find out that 99% of what you're looking at doesn't matter, like has a very minimal effect, yet there are certain things that the field will treat. Like if you say the correlation, if the correlation coefficient is for this stat is 0.04, but people are treating it like 0.28. Like, to me, that's the edge of people like, well, I gotta play Nelson Cruz against a lefty. All of a sudden, he's 10% more owned than he should be. JD Martinez against the lefty, right? Where you got the lefty Masters, you get, Matt Harvey's pitching, right? Or whoever, some gas can that everyone knows is a gas can. Used to be Bartolo Colon, right?
Yes.
Oh, I gotta play Bartolo Colon. And then that stack, if you did an actual projection model, the stack would rate out. I mean, it's not like people were stupid and like no, it's a great spot, but it's still it's almost twice as over. It's over-owned. It's like twice as owned because people are treating these predictive elements as way too predictive than they are. And to me, that's the edge. It's figuring out. It's weird to say, figuring out what doesn't matter may be more important to you than figuring out what does.
No, I completely agree with that. It's that many people are trying to find reasons for things. I guess this is a human thing. It's like, this guy hit a home run. Let me find out why. This guy didn't. He didn't strike out as many times as I thought. Why? And the thing is, like you said, a lot of that doesn't matter, especially when you're talking about DFS. We're not talking about making a model. We're not talking about trying to perfect a predictive model every day of what guys are trying to do. We're trying to figure out what guys are trying to do tonight. Obviously, it's still a game. We're trying to predict things, but we're not trying to predict it in such a way that has to be framed that we have to be able to explain it. Maybe somebody hit a foul home run and that doesn't show up in the box score, and that was your chance that you missed out on. That type of thing happens in DFS, and I guess when people try to explain every little detail that's happening, it also happens in the NBA. It's like, how come this guy shot 6 for 27? It's like, well, maybe he just had a bad night. Maybe his leg was hurting and you didn't know. And so those type of things you don't need to understand, when you're trying to make lineups. What I guess the most important thing is that what other people are trying to do. If like you were saying, that's the edge. It's that if other people are trying to figure out, well, let's use an example. I think I just saw Terry Rozier was doubtful today, right? Devontae Graham tonight, is going to shoot really poorly because the Lakers do really well by the point guards. Well, that may be important, over a sample of 82 games if they're playing the Lakers every night. But if we're talking about just tonight, that's not as important as if as if, let's say, he's 85% owned, and it's just a bad spot, that kind of thing.
Right, because also understand with a lot of those basketball ones, it's like, well, what's a point guard?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, that's the problem with those statistics. But the thing is, people will. It's one of those things. Like people will ask me, it's like, do you read content? Do you listen to podcasts? And I go, yes. And I go, but I thought you said nothing matters. I thought you say you just look at the numbers, you look at the projections, you build your lineups, the names on a spreadsheet. Why are you reading content? Why are you listening to content? Because I want to know what everyone else is doing, right? I literally don't care about anyone else's opinions. I just want to know that, according to ownership projections, he's 14%, but I've seen this name across like 3 articles and 4 podcasts, and there's a narrative of this, like he's going to be 22% owned. And then because of that, now there's a domino effect of, now that stack's going to be more owned, and that means this pitcher's going to be more. Now everything starts morphing, and then you can start to see where the field, what these chalk lineups are going to start looking like more often than not, and then go, it's over-owned. Yes, it's the highest probable scenario, but it's the probability of it occurring is more than is lower than what it's going to be owned, which means there are probabilities that are much lower that are going to be owned even lower than that. Mm-hmm. And then especially in MLB where I'm more of a multi-entry player, I'm saying to myself, I'm building 100 lineups tonight, and I could play 8 different teams, and just like and like what teams I'm going to play, whoever I believe is under-owned or whatever, doesn't mean I don't play the high probability play. If I'm going to play the chalk Oakland stack, I'm going to pair it with a 1% owned pitcher, or if I'm playing a 4-4 on FanDuel, it's Oakland plus Marlins, and the Marlins are 2% owned. It's like, okay, you could do those types of things, but building, lineups, not players. Same thing in baseball, lineups, not stacks, not pitchers, that type of thing. But if you ask me, like, well, who do you like to, like, who do I, dude, but do you see where the I don't want to call it criticism, but the backlash from someone that has not switched over to the game theory side, they still think it's about predicting outcomes, that they take a look at my style and go, well, all you're doing is throwing shit against the wall. I mean, like how do you replicate what I do other than it's like to them it looks like I'm just throwing shit against the wall, and they think that I'm well, how do you win this way? And I go, well, I lose 94% of the time. And I go, oh, you lose 94% of the time. Why should I listen to you? It's like, yeah, because I made $50,000 losing 94% of the time. And they just don't, how is that possible? It's like, yeah, because the 6% of the time I win first place. I win second place. I win third place. It's like, but you're going to be wrong so often. I go, yeah, I know I'm going to be. I know. That's why I'm playing 8 fucking stack. That's why it's a 12-game slate. And I have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But they're all individually, all those stacks are positive EV. I don't know which one it's going to be today. So I want to smooth out the variance instead of like, oh, I'm just going all in on the Marlins today. It's like why? I mean, you can, but do I want to risk 180 slates if I need to go all in on a 1% team every day? I may miss the right 1% team on every single day, and at the end of the year, I'm down $70,000. It's like, no, okay, I'll diversify a little bit more, and I'll just like give myself little shots, take little shots here, little shots there. But Peter, you could understand that someone that, like, you understand what I'm doing. We look at the top players. We see that their portfolios are very diversified.
Yes.
But when it comes to someone asking you for advice on, how to play MLB DFS better, and your response is find a couple of stacks, stack them up, and press the button and hope for the best. It's like, how is that? They're expecting you to. You must pour into Statcast data and all like, dude, like I can make lineups in 7 minutes. Like I don't know what I can make 100 lineups in 7 minutes with no problem. And I'm these pictures, you run a couple of times because maybe you get a weird one-off every, like you have to
You
start.
have too much of somebody.
Right. You want to be a little bit more diversified, so you start cutting down some stuff, and then you upload it, and then there you go, you're done. It's like that people are thinking that people are spending like 6 hours trying to build their lineups, and it's like, nope, 7 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I consider myself a regular person because I have a 9 to 5 job, and I still play DFS. And people ask, it's like, well, how do you do so well and also have your other job? It's like, well, I focus on my other job, and then near lock, when all the lineups are out, I figure out what the field is doing because by that time, Jamino does a really good job of ownership. I'll run the optimal and I'll try to figure out what others do, and then that's where your baseline is. You look at a slate, most slates, like today I think is a very, very pitching heavy slate, but most slates, you're going to like you said, 12 stacks, and then you start eliminating one by one, but then when you click your, I play in the 20 max all the time, and I'll play 5 or 6 stacks in the 20 max. People are, sometimes say that's too much. And I'm like, well, I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to go all in on, like a 4% team and, strike out. I just want to, play these. I guess baseball has maybe 200 slates or so. I want to play these 200 slates, and then I want to even out when I'm going to hit them. It's like going all in all the time. One stack is a little difficult. So I think the backlash, like you said, it's obviously not the right approach for them, right? I think it just takes them time to understand. It's hard for them because they see the big screenshots. I think you've talked about this on a previous pod. It's like they see these big screenshots. They think, oh, these people are winning all the time. They must know what they're doing. They must have some perfect model that can, figure out who the best plays are. And in reality, I always tell them the same thing. It's actually much, much simpler than that. It's that you figure out what the field is trying to do. You make a good lineup, and like you were saying, hey, if I'm playing the 35% owned Dodgers today, maybe I need to find a 2% pitcher and a 2% 3-man, in order to put that together. Or maybe I'm not playing the 35% Dodgers, and then I can play the 2 chalkiest pitchers, Bauer, and I think tonight, I forgot who it was, but Bauer and Bieber, So right. It's that they need to understand, when, obviously I'm sure you get text of who do you like tonight? And I just list off 6 pitchers and 6 hitters. And, to me, that's very helpful. To them, it's probably not very helpful, but I think it just takes a certain mindset. Just like everything, it probably takes a lot of experience in playing more contests. I always tell everybody who's trying to start, start in the dime, start in the quarter, 20 max though. Play as many lineups as you can just so you can understand the concepts of, hey, which lineups are good and which lineups are bad. Because eventually, just like we're talking about sample sizes of baseball players and everything, sample sizes of DFS contests are the same exact thing. It's that if you see, hey, this lineup is winning a certain percentage of the time, today and tomorrow and the next day, then you understand that that's the type of build you want to make, and this goes across all sports because that's actually how, I became, my quote unquote hot streak has started, because it actually started during COVID last year for esports. Because I knew nothing about esports, it was just some video game that people are playing. But I took the concepts that I understood from all the other sports. I was copying, hey, what is Brick doing? What is Awesome? I see them at the top all the time, And so you understand that what they're trying to do with their lineups is what you should be trying to do with your lineups,
Right, same thing with MMA. I played MMA during COVID. I never watched MMA. I watched MMA long before they had rules. MMA, right? Yeah. Right. The Hoist Gracie, Ken Shamrock, like way long ago, before John McCarthy. When they would fight 3 times in a night, and there wouldn't be any weight classes, right? Like that type of shit. But taking the concepts of like, okay, let me take a look at results DB, and I took the concepts of Showdown. I basically said, like, how many it's an 11-fight card, there's only 22 options, and it's a contest with 68,000 entries. So obviously this is all about getting uniques. Like your EV is going to get cut dramatically if you're playing duplicated lineups. So of course, if you're aiming for uniques, you're going to be building lineups that are fucked up. I mean, like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, completely. That the win probability goes way down, but when you win first place by yourself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's a concept. I mean, I didn't have to know anything about MMA other than how do I build, if I'm playing 50 lineups, how do I build 50 unique lineups or close to, like, it doesn't have to be unique. Yes, you could leave 17,000, just like in basketball, right? You go, leave 17,000. Yeah, likelihood of that winning is going to be almost nothing.
Yeah.
So it'll be unique, just have no win equity whatsoever. So in MMA, that's what I do. So like, do I have to know MMA? Now I mentioned before the concept of obviously in the higher weight classes, it's a more powerful punch. There's more that those are higher variance fights, and typically in the higher weight classes, they're also slower, which means it's a 3-round fight. Either there's going to be it could be a first round knockout and one guy gets 140 points, or the winner of this fight doesn't score more than 50, right? Because then nothing happens. They end up clenching. So it's like some people look at that and go, oh, they see the odds and they go, I need to have both sides of the fight. And I go, if that's the consensus of people are going to be loading up on this heavyweight fight, maybe I'm building more unique lineups. Now all this ownership's going there. And I'm like, dude, if this goes to the decision, anyone with either of these fighters on this is dead.
Yeah.
Their lineup's dead. And I look at the ownership and like one fighter's 32% owned, the other fighter's 28% owned. It's like, dude, any lineup that doesn't have this fight in it beats 60% of the field. Now, it doesn't mean I don't play that fight. It just means that since the field is overestimating, I'm gonna go, like, they'll be smattered. You know, they'll be in lineups that I could find that are gonna be unique with them in it. And then the thing that happens, that we go back to the originally said, that someone will say to me, this happens all the time, in any sport or like in MMA. Like it's like, okay, I'm gonna build a bunch of lineups without the main event. Because a lot of people like automatically, it's like they got to take one side of the main event because it's a 5-round card. It's a 5-round fight.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not optimal. So I mean, sometimes other fights get there, and they go, well, what happens if the 60% on favorite in the main event wins and gets 120 points? You know what I say? Then I lose.
Yes.
Then I lose. What happens if I shove with the flush draw, get called, and the flush doesn't come in? Well, then I lose. So you're okay with losing? I said, is DFS going away? Is today the last slate of DFS ever? Right? Is it the correct decision? Yes. So I'm going to do it, even if it's low probability. If I show a positive return doing so, right? I mean, to me, that's the mentality. I think overall, the more that you could get to that type of mentality, which it comes natural to me. So that's why it's hard for me to understand. Mm-hmm. I played poker for so long that you have to think like that you can't be a good poker player without if you're gonna base your whole thing on one hand. I mean, like, come on, you're playing even live. You're playing like 30 hands an hour. So like you can't. But obviously, you've seen bad players. You like playing at tables where a person gets tilted over the course of one hand. Typically, they're bad players, and then they start tilting even more. So like, I get so unlucky. Last time I hit the flush. This time I gotta hit the flush, or this dealer is unlucky. Like, you want to play against those people, but don't you think that if you could think in terms of like outside of one slate and process over results, like almost all the other things tend to fall into place more. Because I don't think you could think in terms of like sample size when it comes to stats, or think in terms of playing lower probability plays that are positive expected value versus I got to play the best plays, the quote best play, that probability chalky stuff. But to me the overarching thing is thinking is that long term, that large sample size type of thinking where like I'm not concerned about getting it right today. I'm concerned about getting it more right than others over a year or 3 years or 5 years. Don't you think that's like the central, like you can't do anything else well without thinking outside of the span of one slate?
Yep. No, completely agree. And I think that's the somewhat difficult part for other people too, especially all the losing. I think that's also part of it too. It's that, if it's hard to tell yourself, well, let's start with the easy part. It's easy to tell yourself that you're making the right decision today. Let's say, you fade the Dodgers today and they go for 11 runs. You're like, oh, well, it was still the right decision. These guys are 45%. You do that 6 days in a row. You lose 6 days in a row. Eventually, you're, for us, we played for so long that it's okay. We understand how it is. But for other people, it's hard. It's like, well, that's it. The nenext time I have to play the Dodgers because, these guys went out for 11. And then that day they get shut out. And then they're like, oh, well, what is this? And then they just, for them, it's the mentality for certain people has to, it's difficult for them to change their mindset. But for, like you said, I think in order to become a better player, that has to be what you're thinking. Your thinking cannot be over one slate. It probably can't even be over a week. It has to be, a season, like you said, 3 seasons, 5 seasons. It just has to be a long enough sample for you to realize that, hey, I'm doing well enough that I am making the right decision. And I guess unless somebody wins, maybe the first week or the first month, it's hard for them to understand that concept until they actually win it, But the thing is, you have to see that other winning players have this mindset, and that's why you have to change your mindset, even if you're not winning at the certain time,
Right, like winning players. I'm in a Discord with a bunch of top GPP players. Like the number one thing that during a slate is rooting against the chalk.
Yes,
Like
yes,
it's almost like whoever the chalk is on the slate, it's like damn chalk donkeys got there again, and like no one's winning, right? And like it's like if the chalk gets there, good tournament players are typically eating it.
Yeah, you
on
might
that.
get some money back, but you're not going to win.
Right, but you're not going to win first place or anything. But it seems like the bad players, the ones I need to play. What, like, we have the age old question: what's good chalk and bad chalk? And I always say that those are descriptive terms.
Agreed.
Like you could say over-owned or under-owned. You could say stuff, but good and bad it implies that they're chalk and they're going to do well, and this chalk is not going to. Like, you're still thinking in terms of one game and one slate. It's more the fact of is the 40% owned guy going to be in the winning lineup 40% of the time, or 20% of the time, or 10% of the time? And it's like, okay, to me, that's what bad chalk is, but it's over-owned. There's still the highest probability. Like we see a lot of times, especially in NBA, because NBA is lower variance and injuries and pricing ends up being so inefficient that it's like this $4,500 guy has like a median of like 10x. And it's like you see all the top players, they just jam him in. I mean, and if he doesn't get there, does it get, he was bad chalk. It's like, no, he was good chalk. It's like, but he was 88% owned. Yeah, and he had a 95% chance of putting up 40 points.
Outcome, yeah.
Right. So, but people view, I think the bad chalk, good chalk is a byproduct of that one slate mentality. Right, and going, well, and then people start stringing them together. That's where you could always tell that you're not even close. We're like, well, chalk hit today, which means it can't hit tomorrow, or chalk has been hitting, so I'm going to continue playing. Like the dudes, these are the same people that look at the roulette wheel thing, and it's like, red's been going, right? Yeah. Like it's like, dude, it's 38 numbers on a wheel, right? I mean, like it's going to be whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But I think that if I were to call it the detriment to most DFS players is that one slate mentality, instead of that long period of time. But I mean, how do you functionally do you think that? I know that I'm not an emotional person. Like I've gotten beaten in poker, and the bad beats go on forever. 1-outers, whatever the fuck's going on. Like, I've seen it all. So, like, to me, like, losing in DFS, getting blanked, brick completely, like, it doesn't affect it. Barely. A big downswing, it will affect. A $30,000 downswing, that affects everyone.
You're human.
For me to say that it doesn't affect you, it would be lying. It doesn't affect me as great as other people, but there's some people that lose. They're playing $50 and they go 50-0 and they're on tilt for the rest of the night. I'm like, how you? To me, I can't. How do you get better? Because to me that is the one slate mentality. Because no one with more than a one slate mentality would be tilting over if you're playing 1% or less of your bankroll per slate, or even 5% of your bankroll less per slate. There should be no reason to tilt over the results. You should be playing. You could say this over and over. I'm trying to figure out, because I like teaching people. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's why you have your course. Yeah.
Right. That you're going to lose, because people's expectations in DFS, I think, are insanely high.
Yeah.
of
And
like
part of that is screenshots. I think that's part of it,
right, but that's confirmation bias because you're seeing different people and different. They're
Yes.
right,
Hmm.
but the fact is like you can ask so many people like, oh, how often do you think I profit in GPPs in NBA or and profit meaning I put in X amount of entries and get more
Yep.
back,
Hmm.
right? And then most of them go more than half the time, or like, dude, I lose 90% of the time. Almost
Hmm.
every top GPP player loses money 90% of the time, but no one talks. No one talks about that. But and it, how do you get people into that mindset of that? And I always quote Drew Dinkmeyer because I think his quote is the perfect. I try to use his quote as how to teach people. It's not about how often you win. It's about how much you win when you do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's not about winning. If you're winning 50%, if you're profiting 50% of the time playing GPPs, profiting, which means it could be
You're getting
$1.
back. Yeah.
Right, just whatever. Which means you're cashing more often. I'm pretty sure with the 15% rake at the end of the year, if you actually put your results into RotoTracker, you're down.
Yes, yeah, no, I was one of those. I mean, I've shown my tracker too. Yeah, I was one who was cashing 54% in lottos, and especially the lotto because when you min cash, it's what 1.4x
5x,
now. Yeah, it's
right?
not even like So yeah, I was one of those players, so I definitely understand that.
But it
I
gives you,
think
it lulls you into like,
a
well,
false
I'm
sense of
putting in
security.
100 and I'm getting back 105. Or I'm putting in 100 and getting back 98. And then you see some of your lineups like maybe coming like 112th. And you're like, well,
Yes,
I'm
I
getting
was so
closer.
close.
And it's like 112th and first is a way too, like, and you take a look at that lineup and it's like, it's on a day where like the chalk like smashed. But of course, you didn't have the other 4% owned guy that hit 2 home runs. So like you couldn't have gotten past 112. You had, in fact, your lineup that came in 112th had less chance of winning than a lineup that came in 58,000th place. Like, but people like you say that to someone, and it's like, how could the lineup that had the best plays in it that came in 112th be a way worse lineup than a lineup that is like almost next to last place that has like 2% owned stacks in it? It's like, well, the win condition of your lineup is like, dude, it was duplicated 3 times. Like in MLB on a large slate, if your lineup is duplicated, that means you fucked up. I mean,
Yeah,
you fucked
yeah.
up somehow.
Yeah, any duplicated lineup on anything probably bigger than an 8 gamer is you messed up somehow if somebody else landed on it as well. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the easiest thing that I would say, I guess, I guess I shouldn't say easy, but I think if you lose, it's actually kind of better. Like almost the more you lose, the more you understand that, oh, this actually isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. It's like, losing 1 day or 2 days, you can convince yourself, like you said, oh, but I got back $20 the other day. It's okay. I'm probably doing well anyway, But if you lose for like a week in a row, and that's how you know that you're making good lineups, that's almost better for your DFS game than winning, $40, 4 nights in a row.
Yeah, but most
Because
people lose a week in a row. I would say most average DFS players aren't building good lineups.
well, that's
They're
true
not
too.
losing because they're not losing the same way that we're losing, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
but to me that's a cop out because how is someone supposed to know? Me and you, we could play MLB. We've been playing what almost 2 weeks, right,
Hmm.
of MLB. I think I've profited in GPPs twice in 14 days.
Yeah.
Profited by like $20. I mean, like
Well,
fucking
I finished
stupid.
third in the GPP, but
Okay,
yes,
okay, so you okay,
yeah.
Mr. Big.
But it's the same
Right,
concept.
same
Yes.
concept, right? It's like so it's like, but I've lost 12 days, but my losing were good lineups, and your losing was bad lineups. Like, how is anyone supposed to know? Like, how is anyone supposed to know objectively, like what that is? Because there's still plenty of times that I build 100 lineups, and then I somehow in the slate because I wasn't paying attention, I look at some of the lineups and go, yeah, if I would like, I look at 20 of the lineups and I go, I think these 20 lineups were bad. I may have built 80 good lineups, but these 20, like they weren't paired together. I'm not talking about diversification, just like this one off is here, and if I would have looked at this, I would have switched this out because it would have given me more leverage not to have this guy in who had the other guy in. But it just so happened to fit the optimize, it fit the right variables. Uh, but normal average DFS players, they just see winning and losing lineups, So so how am I supposed to tell people that, oh, my losing lineups are good and your losing lineups are bad?
Yeah, it sounds really awful when you say it like that. But I think that's just experience, and and as I keep saying earlier, you learn from the best. I mean, I'm never afraid to say something that, oh, I don't know, or this person is a better, player than me. I think once you understand, or put in your mindset that, hey, you don't know everything, it's that, you can try to become better every single day, but at a certain point in time, there probably is somebody who's better than you, and that's what you should be learning from. So I guess I would never phrase it to them that, hey, this is a horrendous lineup, but I would be something like, hey, this might have a little too much chalk. Did you ever think about leveraging this one spot because you're too overowned, in your 5-man or something like that? I guess that's the best way I would tell, losing players to see how they can improve. Try to understand your lineups. I don't like the overall. You know how sometimes they talk about cumulative ownership.
Right.
I don't like that sometimes because it's like, every slate is different. Today's slate might be different than tomorrow's, might be different, from the next day. It's that you have to understand how your lineup looks, and I think this also goes into contest selection. Because what your lineup looks like in a certain contest can be completely different. A quote unquote good lineup in this contest would be a bad lineup in another contest. So let's talk about, let's say, the lotto. You're trying to, get every single perfect, guy who hits three. I think Higashioka yesterday, right, hit 2 home runs. If you don't have him in the lotto, you can't win. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter over the rest of your lineup. But if you're playing a smaller contest, you shouldn't be focusing on trying to predict, who the best players are, trying to hit every perfect spot. You're just trying to build a good lineup that has correlation and has a little leverage, So a good lineup in that would be, a standard 5-3 that has, a low owned stack, But if you're playing the lotto, you may have to switch that to a 5-1-1-1 or something, in order to make that the lineup that can hit first. Because especially, I think also a thing, maybe people do notice this, I'm not 100% sure, I can't speak for others, it's that all these tournaments are top heavy. It's that, so, like your example, finishing 112th is what, like $140, finishing in first is $100,000. So all your lineups have to have first place equity. It can't have min cash equity, obviously that comes with it, but you have to make every lineup that has, win equity. And I think that's the thing that determines whether or not your lineup is good or bad, and for a person to figure out objectively whether or not it's good or not, I think that just takes time. You just have to look at other people's lineups. You have to be honest with yourself. I think that's also a very difficult thing, not only, in DFS, but in gambling and life. You have to be honest with yourself. Am I making the right decision with this lineup in this contest? And I think
and also just to add to that, sometimes the concepts are opposite of one another of what you would think. Like, for instance, in baseball, like you mentioned before, in larger field contests, you need to get a higher score. You need to come closer to the nuts. The likelihood of anyone having the nuts is low, right? But you have to have a higher score, right? Relatively to your beating 70,000 entries versus beating 200 entries is much different. Now, correlation increases the variance of your lineup. Okay? So people think in terms of the more correlation, the higher scores that I could get, which is true.
True.
Is absolutely true. So they think, well, large field, I need the most amount of correlation. Said, but also you have to figure, you also need to get closer to the nuts. And the nuts isn't necessarily going to be correlated. So when you're playing large field tournaments, correlation is good and bad at the same exact time. Where on something like FanDuel, in the large field contest, I'm much more likely, the larger the slate is, to play 4-3-1s than play 4-4s. I will play some 4-4s, but they're like, well, don't you want the most amount of correlation? It's like, no, I want the most amount of, maximize my chances of hitting close to the nuts. And a 4-4 stack may not be the nuts. There may be an 8% owned guy in the outfield that hits 3 home runs today, but the stack for his team doesn't get there. But at 8% owned, it's going to be a one-off somewhere, And if I don't have that one guy, like once I build all 4-4s, I've literally locked myself out of a winning lineup in a large field contest. Now in a small field contest, let's take a 200 entry contest. You go, well, correlation isn't as necessary. Like, I don't need to increase the variance of my lineup because I don't need the highest score. But the thing is that good luck. Like, oh, I'm going to play my cash lineup in a 200. Like, you don't have enough leverage now, right? So now you have that problem. So it's like, well, what do? Most of the time in smaller field contests, I'm playing the 4-4. You're like, why are you maximizing correlation in a small field contest? Isn't that increasing your variance too much? It's like, but I don't need to get the nuts. So that the 3 home run guy could be in my 4-man stack with 3. It could be, the 4-man could be 48, 3, 3, 6. And I still win the 200-man contest. I can't win the large field with 3, 3, 6 from the other 3 guys. But now the 8% owned guy in the 200-man, like, I maybe, like, there's only, how many lineups is that? There's 12 lineups with that? I mean, like, I could win with, as long as I have the 3 home run guy. But those concepts, it seems like you're saying, well, oh, so you want more correlation, but you also don't want more correlation in a large field. You don't need correlation in a small field, but you kind of want it so you could just make 2 decision points. And it's like, as long as these 2 teams do well, and I capture like the one guy that goes off, like I could win against 200 entries. Like, to me, it still comes back to that nonlinear type of, like, how do you, it's almost like cognitive dissonance. Like, you have to think 2 opposite things that go together and then judge the lineup, how you build the lineups based on that. Where it's like, hence why I will say, when people, what do you think of, I'm going to use yesterday's MLB slate. And you go, what do you think of Matt Chapman or something like that? And I go, well, I wouldn't play Matt. I would be less likely to play Matt Chapman in Glasnow lineups, right, as a one-off. Or I'm less. If you're gonna play Olsen and Chapman and Canha, I wouldn't play Olsen, Chapman, Canha, Laureano. I'd be more inclined to mix in some Piscotty in there. So yeah, I'm not playing the complete chalk Oakland A's 4-man. Like, but, well, should I take out Canha or Laureano? And my answer is, I don't give a fuck. Yeah. Like either. Individually, I don't like. But the concept is like, how do I play the chalk team without playing the chalk 4-man? Like, that's the concept. But the actual, who do you play? Do you play Jed Lowry? Or do you play Stephen Piscotty? Or do you, to me, it's like, don't spend that much time thinking about those types of decisions. Just as long as you know the concept of what you're doing. But sometimes you're weighing things where it's like, this is why I say, Peter, I say this in the rotograph. I haven't said in the ad more, I haven't been there in God knows how long.
Well, we're moving to Discord, so you won't be there. Yeah.
So I'd say any answer that, if you're asking me a question that I can answer with a yes or a no, it's a stupid question. And any question that I can answer with a number, like an actual number, is probably a stupid question also. And then a lot of people are like, well, what the fuck other questions are there? It's like, well, that's the point. The point is that, like, oh, they say, should you play 4-4s in large field GPPs? And I go, not necessarily. Some 4-4s, maybe. Some 4-3-1s. Some 4, you could play 4-1-1-1. Isn't 4-1-1 horrible? Like, dude, it depends on the lineup. It depends on the contest, right? So you could play, oh, this guy played this in the small field contest, but you said that you should just play 4-4s because you want them. Like, dude, there may be some 4-2-2 lineups that accomplish the same thing. Like, they could be 5,000 lineups of all different types of combinations that all have similar expected values. So there's no, like, one thing that you do, but that still comes down to the, like, weighing concepts in your mind and then judging, like, because people will look at the winning lineup and then go, well, this guy just picked out 8 home runs. And I'm like, well, good luck replicating that, because that's not long-term profitable, because like, that it just isn't. There's no, like, you'll end up making 7 million lineups and never getting there.
Yep. And that goes back to our first point. It's that you can't look at a thing on a one slate sample size. It's that if you're trying to treat everything that, hey, this guy did this on this night, so that must be what it is, it's just not good for you to set hard set rules. It's for you to understand, and that's why I said if I was talking to any DFS player who's just starting out to 20 max the dime, you should I think you should make as many lineups as you possibly can that you can afford, just to get yourself to making good lineups. I think
hand build them even.
Yes, hand build them. Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm still a hand builder. I mean, I use the optimizer to run, what the projection should do, but I hand build all my 20 lineups. It's only 20 lineups. Obviously, if you're trying to hand build 150, it's probably too much. But hand building is how I learned to make sure that you're making a good lineup for that contest. It's
That's what I did when I started. Yeah, I may be known for lineup HQ, and I because I've been using it for 3 years. But before, in 2016, when I played MLB, and I got like 2 second places my first season of MLB, I was hand building 40 lineups. I mean, 10 it depends or whatever. 10 lineups, 20 lineups, 30 lineups, and playing in the large field, not playing small field stuff. I was still playing the lottos. But it's like, oh, but you're not playing 150? Why do I need? As long as I build 20 plus EV lineups, what does it matter? So but people would make fun of. That's how I got made fun of in the beginning. Of like, oh, $27 worth of volume, and I bink a GPP like that, because I would just make choices. I would just say, okay, I'm going to stack the Marlins, I'm going to stack this, and then make sure to build individually good lineups, and then eventually you learn how to use what I call optimizers efficiency tools. It's like I can visualize what my 20 lineups are going to look like. Maybe not exact players, but I know what they're going to look like. I know I'm going to have half of this and 20%. I know if I'm paying up here, I'm going to have to pay down there. And I know who's going to have to be in the lineups. And then I could just program the tool to kind of make them for me. And then once you get good at that, then now I can make 100 lineups. Now I can make 150 lineups. And then sometimes some of the lineups, you're just like it just whatever fit. Like, how'd you know to put that guy? Dude, it's just whatever fit. Just fucking, yes. I had no idea. It just, it fit the variables of the lineups that I'm looking for, and it just so happened to be that $2,700 guy that hit 2 home runs today. But I was playing a bunch of this stack, so that's why he ended up in 2 out of 100 lineups as the 8th hitter. I didn't specifically say I wanted to play that guy. Right? Or a catcher goes off, and typically it's the catcher.
Yes.
Right? Because you know me, I'm on DraftKings, not on FanDuel because they have the catcher first base position. Base, yeah. But you know me, most of the time the catcher's in my stacks. So it's like if a catcher goes off, I most likely don't have them as a one-off unless it's a Real Muto or Sanchez or one of the high-end catchers. Yeah. And they go, well, how'd you choose to is the catcher for the Tigers? Like, I don't even know who the fuck the guy is. Right. Grenier goes off and like a $2,300 catcher. It's like, well, how'd you know? I didn't know anything. It's just the catcher sucks. So why not just put the guy that's in your stack so you can play the one-off outfielder rather than the one-off catcher? But that's a concept. But the thing is, that concept applies to every MLB slate. So once you start weighing those concepts, then what catcher to play? Like, play whoever's in your stack. Well, what stack? Whatever it is. And then does it come down to that? Like you said before, people are looking for reasons, and they look at how we play, and a lot of top DFS players play, and I go, dude, these guys have no reasons for anything.
Yes, yeah.
Actually they have less reasons than you would possibly think, and it's like they have a projection model and they build plus EV lineups, and if this guy's in 3 lineups, he's in 3 lineups. If that pitcher ends up in 1 lineup and that ends up being the winner, we've seen, you look at some GPP winners, and it's like their winning lineup is like literally has 3 guys in it. That's the only lineup out of their 150 that has those 3 players in it. And all the rest of their lineups aren't even cashing it, but that one got there. And sometimes people look at that and they go, how is that skill? Yeah. And I think that's where the disconnect comes, because
yes,
to anyone that would look like luck. Like, how does that not look like luck?
Well, yeah, from the outside, like you said, it definitely looks like luck. It just looks like, hey, people ask me, it's like, how did you end up on this guy? The Alex Len night. It's like, right. How did you end up on this? And it's like, well, I mean, it just fit. I was late swapping, and I was just clicking around some buttons, and it just fit. So
you needed a cheap set. You needed a cheap center to make that construction work.
Yes, exactly.
And Alex Len is a cheap center that Also, we've seen Alex Len put up 50 points in a game out of nowhere, right? He's the definite, and it turns out he puts up 0. It turns out he doesn't do anything.
That's the.
But it also turns out that having a 3,700, whatever his price was, he was like minimum price. Mm-hmm. The only way to get the construction with all those 7 other players with all those big scores was to have the cheap like that. So it's like, oh, he won with the 0 from Alex Len. It's like, no, he won with that. No one else could have had that construction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the thing where I keep saying practice is just better. It's like if you're practicing making these better lineups, it doesn't really matter what happens. As I've said before, it's okay to say that you don't know. It's a very simple thing, but it's actually kind of hard for especially people who come from from fantasy sports and season long, especially in football. Where people it's like, oh, I know this guy's 4-4, so I know how good this guy is. And when it comes to me, it's like, well, I mean, I guess I'm going to play Matt Ryan, so I'm just going to play this guy. I actually don't know how good he is. I don't really care, but he fits with the stack, he fits with this lineup. And that's more important than actually knowing what's going to happen or what's, how good that guy is,
Right. Trey Burton was in I binked in the slant and Trey Burton got 2 touchdowns. Right. And it's like, well, what made you play Trey Burton? It's like, well, that construction required a cheap tight end and it had T. Higgins in it. Well, the Colts are on the other side of the Bengals. So I said, fuck it, I'll take the Colts. Like, that's it. That's it. Yep. I don't know anything about... Well, no, I knew they were going to run this pitch play. I had no fucking clue what's going on. All I know is that I like intercorrelating players when things are equal. Like, if obviously the projections were like, well, Trey Burton's this and this other guy is like 8 points higher, I'm not going to do that. But, like, when all things are relatively equal, it's like... Well, if I'm playing one side of the game, I'm going to play the same thing in basketball. I mean, that's when I won with Garrett Temple. Like, how the fuck did you know Garrett Temple was going to put up 48 points in that game? Like, all I know is I needed a cheap small forward to fit that construction. That's it. And I was hand building that lineup. And he's like, well, what made you pick Garrett Temple? Because I was playing D'Angelo Russell on the other side of the game. Like, that's it. And people throw up their hand how is that not luck? It's like, no, it's a very weak correlation, but
it's still something.
It's still something. I made a choice based on that, and it was one of those games where he was on the Grizzlies, and they had a short rotation, right? So it's like, so there's a reason there, and he projected as well as any other $3,800 small forward. But like, well, how do you choose between these 12 small forwards? Well, I'm just going to choose the guy that's on the other side of D'Angelo Russell, because if the game gets close and whatever, and And there you go. But people are looking, Peter, you're in these Discords and Slacks and whatever, and you see all these conversations of people looking for reasons. And our answers, because I remember your responses even back when I was, people are talking about that, and I don't know, Fantasy Insiders, back in Add More Funds, and I'm the one that comes in there and they're like, I'm going to play this, I'm doing this. And they go, well, why? I go, because no one else is. I don't. Why do I need a reason? Or
that's actually the most important reason,
right? Or in baseball, like we always get like some like yesterday. If you wanted to stack against Freddie Peralta yesterday with the Cubs, I didn't because there were so many other stacks I was playing. I don't blame you on DraftKings, not on FanDuel.
I did. In the 76-20, I played 5 Cubs stacks.
Right, because
Peralta was going to be 50%, and you just hope he has a bad night. I mean, I know the Cubs suck. I know they strike out a lot, but hey, this guy's 50%. That's my way to 100K. If he has one bad night,
Right. I mean, and you're stacking this against the SP2, not the S. Like yes. Freddie Peralta is more likely to get blown up than Tyler Glass now, and Tyler Glass could get blown up also. But like, so you can't be. To me, you can't be wrong if you just like. On DraftKings, it's like you want a 5-man stack against a chalk SP2, and you just did that every night. There's to me, that's the reason. Only because that's the highest relative value spot on the slate. It always is, depending on obviously on the ownership. You get a 50% owned SP2 on a 12-game slate. Like, dude, the stack against him is like 1% owned. Right, the Cubs, like Brian hit a home run, right, yesterday.
Yes.
How owned was he on DraftKings?
I think like 2.8 or something in that contest. Yeah.
Right, but you have to. But people look at that and they go, well, why should I play the Cubs over? Like, no, because if the Cubs do well, that means half of the lineups in the contest because Peralta's 50% owned. These two things are negatively correlated to one another. So, like, you're not going to win because the Cubs put up 7 runs. You're going to win because 50% of the lineups of the contest are dead.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't need 250 points in baseball now. Because the chalk SP2 has -6. And everyone's cursing the wind and tilting in chats and everything. And you took advantage of it, and that stack is 1% owned. But understand the probability is that it's going to fail.
Well, my lineup's finished almost dead last,
Right.
and that's the thing that you have to understand, that, hey, but I made a great lineup, but it finished last. That's the thing that, I guess experience teaches you this too, but it's that as long as you're listening to these type of podcasts, you're listening to smarter players, all the smart players will tell you this. It's that, it doesn't matter if it's almost better if you finish last than if you finish,
on the
in the
cash
middle of the
line.
pack.
Right.
Exactly.
If I fit on them, I get upset when when I know I made mistakes. I've said this before. I can know how good my lineups are once the game's locked. Before any results come in. Obviously, in baseball, things lock at different times, but I'm just looking at the owner. I'm looking at, like, yesterday, for instance. I know at baseball, I don't know why we talk about individual slates, but I mean, it just happened to be yesterday. Mm-hmm. I thought Freddie Freeman on FanDuel was going to be higher owned. I thought the Braves would be higher owned. I played a bunch of the Braves because I was playing a lot of the Braves-Marlins game, but I avoided playing Freddie Freeman as a one-off more because I thought he would be like 25% owned. He ended up being 14% owned. So now Freddie Freeman had a horrible game. It didn't matter. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that I should have had Freddie Freeman as a one-off in more of my lineups had I known that he was 14% owned and not 24%. I misjudged the leverage. I should have had more Ozzy Albies than I did because the Braves were less owned than I thought they would be. Like, that has nothing to do with the results. That has not. But I could look right there and go, "Oops." I go, had I known this, and then Yordan Alvarez is like way more owned on FanDuel. I thought he would be owned on DraftKings.
Yes.
But he was way more owned on FanDuel than I ever thought he would be, and I had too much. I did too much of him as a one-off. That was one of those types because I didn't want to play Freeman.
Because of the salary.
Right.
Yep.
So to me, those are the decisions I'm looking at going, okay, these lineups are much worse than they should. They may still be fine, but they didn't accomplish the things I was going to accomplish. Now that I have a Braves stack, I have a Braves Oakland stack with a cheap, I did a cheapie in that lineup, and I'm playing Zach Greinke in that lineup on FanDuel. And you know why? Because I think I'm playing the Stone Cold 4-4 chalk.
Yeah.
Right, so it's like I can't play Glasnow in this lineup. But it turns out that the Brave stack is way lower owned, and Piscotty is way lower owned than I thought even in the Oakland stack. And I'm like, dude, Glasnow should have been in this line.
Yes.
Because of this ownership now, this should have been a Glasnow lineup. Now, that lineup wouldn't have won or anything, but I look at it objectively and go, based on the information we now have, because you don't get the ownership beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Based on
we try.
Right. You would hope so. Try to predict it. Mm-hmm. Then you could judge and go, is this a good lineup for this contest? And that's where I look and I go, no, this wasn't. Yes, this was. Right? I look at some Marlin stacks I had that when Adam Duvall hit that home run, I wasn't checking anything. So I checked, Adam Duvall hit a home run. Okay. I had him in almost a third of my lineups. I looked, he was 3% owned. And I'm like, to me, that was a great, there you go. I thought Adam Duvall was going to be 12% owned. I mean, I expected to see, it's okay, I guess you need Adam Duvall, even as a one-off, because he projected well in the bat, and the Marlins projected well, depending on the model you were looking at. So to me, if he's 3%, that means that's even higher plus EV. The Marlins could have been blanked yesterday. Mm-hmm. Adam Duvall could have gone 0 for 5, and I would have looked at the ownership of him at 3% and go, I'm glad I had 30% of him. Right?
Yes.
But that's what good players think. But I'm not saying anything that's crazy, because every DFS player that I talk to that's a good GPP player thinks in some fashion, maybe they may not verbalize in these exact ways, thinks in those terms of, You look at your projections, you look at the ownership versus the actual ownership, and go, what are these? Are these good lineups? Some people you could simulate it, right? Once you get all the ownership and all the lineups in a contest, if you have an accurate projection model, like you could just run a sim. You could run 1,000 sims of the slate of the actual contest and see how many times certain lineups win versus others, and then you could even determine, like, were your lineups good on average with the field? I mean, you can do that. That's a little bit more advanced. You'd have to, maybe some Python or something. You have to do some work with some spreadsheets and some programming. But that's what top GPP players are doing. They're not. What is the results from tonight? It's like, no, what's the expected return on my lineups based on now that we have all the information? The game is now. Like, there's no more choices. It's a game of perfect information. All the games have locked. All the ownership's in. You can't make any swaps. And then now we're rolling dice. What happens? Is the flush draw going to come in? And then okay, simulate that 10,000 times and see which lineups are better than others. So even if your lineup loses, if your expected return is high, then what the fuck else are you supposed to do? Like that is what it is. The flush didn't come in. Oh well.
Yeah, and like I said, that's basically you keep talking about it, and I agree. That's how you become a better player. That's really what it comes down to. I actually think that's actually a good idea for every player. When the lineup locks, you try to tell yourself, you post it somewhere in Discord or something. Do you think this is a good lineup? And you answer it yourself. And you should be able to answer it. By 10 p.m., wherever the last game is, or 10:10, whatever, you should be able to answer whether or not your lineup was good. It doesn't matter if you're winning or you're losing. As long as you're making a good lineup, that's what you need to tell yourself, that, hey, I'm doing the right thing.
Right, a good lineup. We're using the term good. A better way is plus EV or high first place win equity. Like, not just good. Good is very just like...
Well, yeah, generic. Yeah.
Generic, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what is a good lineup?
Yeah, it's like, did you play this in the right place? That kind of thing, I think that's a good thought process for every player if they want to get better.
Right.
Because ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You can be making one lineup, you can be making 2, 30, 150. It doesn't matter as long as every one that you're making is plus EV. That's really what's important, not the actual player, not the actual, prediction, of what's going to happen tonight. Again, like we keep talking about, I actually don't know what's going to happen. I actually don't care sometimes. It's like, let's just play out the slate. Let's see what happens, But the only thing we always do is we root against the chalk, because that's the highest, if the highest owned probability outcome does not happen, those are the slates that you're trying to win. You're not trying to win where, the Dodgers go off for 11 runs every night. Those are the slates that are very difficult to win. You're trying to win where half the field has the stack and they have no points.
Right.
Those are the So that's why I actually think that's another thing, I guess. I mean, again, there's no hard set rules for DFS, but a thing for newer players to think about is that what's the easiest way for me to get to the top? That's something that they always have to think about, when they're making their lineups, Well,
they would think, Peter, the easiest way for me to play the best plays, because they're the most likely, right? But they don't realize that you're playing against other people, and if everyone else is going to do the same thing, that's actually the hardest way to win.
Yes, exactly. It's where you were talking about, it's two different mindsets. It's like, well, I know the Dodgers are the best play, but 40% of the field's going to have it. So how do I make a right balance? And that's where I keep talking, experience comes in. It's that the more lineups you make, you can understand that, hey, this lineup actually has some win equity. If I'm playing 40% Dodgers but with 2% pitchers, I can win with this lineup. If I'm playing 40% Dodgers with a 60% pitcher, well, 40% of the field has that lineup. How can you win? You need a near perfect outcome versus something else that only needs to happen. If the Dodgers are, I think they're minus 300, they only need to lose 20% of the time versus your 2% outcome, even though you're playing a lineup that you think has the highest probability of happening. I think that's the thought process that somebody has to make, when they're trying to make a good lineup.
Right, and you can tell the people that don't have that process, that type of mentality down, when all the chalk hits and you get I scored 350 points in NBA and didn't even cash. Right, because it's the misunderstanding of that concept of, like, it doesn't matter. Tyler Glass now put up 75 points on FanDuel yesterday. He was 58% owned or whatever. Like, doesn't matter. Like, wow, I got Tyler Glass last now, right? Yeah, and so did everyone. So did most of the people. Like, it doesn't matter that you scored 75 points when nearly 60% of the field also scored those same points.
Yes,
You need to
yes.
find points where other people don't. But that's the reason, like, that comes down to, we're saying, finding a reason. And sometimes that reason, it sounds stupid to most people. Sometimes the reason is because no one else is. Like, sometimes that is, like, I need to find points that no one else is getting. I'm going to be playing this, I'm going to be playing that, and then I'm going to play this one off against the chalk pitcher. And they're like, why are you playing that guy? Why are you playing the lefty on lefty or whatever? Because he fits and he's going to be 1% owned and no one else is going to do it. They said, and then people would say, well, why can't you find other people, other players that are 1% owned? Yes! You can find 30 of them.
Yes.
And they're there for the same exact reason. Well, why are you playing that guy? Well, because he's 1% owned and he has as much of a shot at getting 15 points as these 30 other guys. So let me just close my eyes and pick one of them. And then people look and go, this is DFS? This is what, dude, the projections are like everyone in this range is projected from 7.2 to 7.5. Like what the fuck's the difference between the point, whatever, play anyone you want. And then, but you still have to, you built the rest of your lineup. You built the whole thing holistically probable, but can you see how frustrated I get?
I mean, you probably get a lot more questions than I do, but the toughest questions for me to answer are like 2v2s and 1v1s.
And you don't know the lineup or the contest it's in.
Exactly. And it's like the projections are, like you say, they're like 0.56 apart. It's like, well, I don't know. It's like, and that's where I go back to needing reasons. Since I'm not looking for those reasons, I cannot tell you that this player is going to outperform because I don't even look at the base set of why this is happening, And so those are always the toughest for me, and that's where I'm just like you, where I default to correlation when that
or correlation
happens.
or leverage. I would say it's like depending on the contest and lineup that it's in, because I don't know. It's like side more either side to the side that's more correlated to your lineup, the rest of your lineup, or if you have chalk in your lineup, play the lower owned one. If you don't have chalk in your lineup, play the higher owned one. But like all of these reasons are game based, are not sport based. So, but that's where 95% of the people go wrong. They're like, well, why should I play Judge over Soto, or why should I play Harper over Bellinger? And it's like, dude, these are the best hitters in the game, like that. But that's in basketball, we see that a lot. I mean, baseball, you see that also. Like, if in basketball, if everyone's playing Harden, I'm playing Westbrook, right? Like if everyone's paying up for a 10K guard, if everyone's playing Luka, I'm playing Karl Anthony Towns in the center spot at 11,000. Like, well, why? Because it's not a 10K guard. Like, yeah, but is there a reason? Like, no, that literally is the reason. Because it's not. Would you be surprised if Bradley Beal went out and scored 60, if Zach LaVine went out and scored 60 points today, would you be shocked? Go, well, he has a bad matchup. But he said, but he's still Zach LaVine. Would you be shocked? Would you be like, holy shit, you got to call your grandma type of shocked? No. Well, he's going to be 2% owned and I'm playing him. Like that. Sometimes it's just he's a great player and no one's playing them. Just like in baseball. You'd be like, oh, everyone's playing the Dodgers. And Juan Soto is sitting there in a national stack at 5% owned on a 12-game slate. And I'm like, well, looks like I'm playing Juan Soto. They go, well, why? Because he's fucking Juan Soto, for fuck's sake. I mean, like sometimes it's, there you go. That's it. But but you're able to, we're both able to. That's why, like, building lineups, and like, obviously you're hand building. So maybe it's a little bit more than 7 minutes. But that's why I could put together MLB lineups in 7 minutes. But it still comes down to, like, how do we reiterate that? How do we reiterate so much to people? Because I remember they had more fun Slack. That's why I left. Right? Because it's stupid. Well, maybe Jaws. Maybe leave.
Yeah.
Getting trolled by him in there. You guys are in Discord now, right?
We are moving to Discord, yes.
Oh, you haven't even moved yet.
Yeah, I think Matt's transitioning most of the people, but some people are still in Slack.
And that's free.
Well, yes.
So if people wanted to join the Add More Funds Slack / soon to be Discord, people could just do that
Yep, they can come. They can ask me questions about 2v2s, and I'll give them the same answer you probably do,
Right.
and they'll probably move on.
Right, but I'll add you. I'll add when it move to Discord. I'll add it because I don't use Slack. I mean, like that's the main reason for DFS. I have Discords now, but now that you could be in the menu, at least it's like okay,
multiple,
right. The only time I ever got notifications from Slack for the Add More Funds Discord is when Jaws would make fun of me. Right. Now I'd show up. It's like you haven't seen me in 5 months. It's like, what are you spying on us? It's like, no, I have keyword search. Like I get a notification when Blender and my name is mentioned. But how just like you transitioned 2 or 3 years ago to finally kind of figuring it out. It's one of those things where I tell people, like, once you get it, you see how stupid everyone else is.
Yes.
It's kind of a like like once it clicks, I don't my answers don't look stupid, and like my answers look like I've had people DM me that have taken the course, that have done well, or I've said something 2 or 3 years ago that they never got it, and now they're doing well, and they'll DM me and say, I don't understand how you put up with these fucking questions anymore. It's like, dude, they're the questions that you asked me 3 years ago. And they go, I know, they're so fucking stupid. Like, and it's hard for me to say other than once you get it, like, then you see how it, like saying before, you see how little everything else matters. You see how actually simpler the game is, rather than how a lot of average DFS players are looking like, what more can I look at, right? What stats should I look at? What more? They're looking how much more content. And we're thinking in terms of how little is needed. That we could, yes, I could look at something and it may impact me by 0.001% or something like that. But it's in the scheme of variance in baseball, especially, fucking nothing. It might as well be zero. So, like, we're in the pursuit of weeding out all the stuff that really, at the end of the day, from a ROI perspective, in this game that we're playing against other human beings, we could chalk up to variance, where, like, no matter what you look at, no matter what looks like it could be predictive, the variance just washes it out. So it's more important to figure out what your opponents are doing than figure out, if this guy hits curveballs well or something like that. Like, once you get that simplification down, and then once you start building good lineups and start doing well, then things start to click. You're able to now do it in NFL, in NBA, in golf, in MMA, and everything. And then you start looking around going, like, now you get why some of the top GPP players can play every slate on every site and play 150 lineups. And, like, how does anyone have that much time? It's like, well, how much time do you need?
And that's the thing. It's that it actually, like you were saying, it actually takes less time than you probably think it does. As a common for not you, but as if somebody else. It's that like I said, I work 9 to 5, so I'm trying to block out all the stuff that doesn't affect me. Because if I'm trying to dig out BVP, or I'm trying to dig out all these things, it's gonna take me forever to go through a person on a slate. I don't care about all that. The game is to beat opponents. It's not to try to score the most points. It's not to try to have somebody tell somebody, hey, I got this guy right tonight. Nobody else got it. That's not the point. The point is to outscore your opponents, and the easiest way to do that is understand what they're trying to do. Just like every other game, if I had perfect information in another game, I could probably beat you. Because I know what you're trying to do. We don't have perfect information, but we have ownership where we have a general understanding of what other people are going to do. So by that, to me, is the most important thing to look at versus all this other stuff that doesn't matter toward this game. That might matter if I'm trying to pick a home run contest or something, but in order to win DFS, I don't need to know what this guy is going to do on a certain night.
Right, just like in poker with that example with the flush draw, and whether or not you're going to jam with it. If you knew your opponent's cards and your opponent had a very weak hand, like, now your fold equity goes from, what you believe is 30% to nearly 100%, right? It's like, this guy only has third pair. If I shove right here, he's going to fold 95% of the time. It's like, now you can make now you can make the totally correct decisions. You take a look at his hand, and he has top set. he ain't going anywhere. He's got the nuts, right? So like now you have to hit. Now you know you're gonna have to hit your flush, and now you look at the pot size and everything, and you go, if I jam here, it's a negative EV decision. So instead of you check, the guy bets. Maybe you call, right? You'll hope that he gives you a free card, right? And you make the flush and he pays you off or something like that. But that may not happen. And then you judge those decisions. But you already know that he has. Once you know what he has, same thing for head-to-heads in DFS. If you knew what your opponent had, you could make the most optimal decisions against them. Just like if you knew ownership beforehand, you'd be able to make. I guarantee you that if I knew exact ownership beforehand, like I would have such a tremendous edge on everyone in the field that it'd be ridiculous. Because projected ownership is tough.
Yes.
But to me,
it's probably the toughest thing.
Yes.
In the game, it's probably the toughest thing to predict. I spend more time trying to predict ownership than I try to predict good players.
Right. That's exactly the point. Mm-hmm. Right. To me, that's the more important thing to get accurate. Right. And it's tough to do because you're dealing with human beings with it. You can't even rely on the math because people are irrational. Right. So you're like, okay, well, it's a Kawhi revenge game. So I got to add 5% to that. Right. Or sometimes it's the projections themselves. So it's not, you know how it is because you may hand build, but you do use projections.
Yes.
You may find a slate like, we get Josh Van Meter is $2,000 and it's second base, and second base is a fairly weak position. And you know that if people are using projections and not knowing what they're doing, Josh Van Meter is going to show up in like 70% of their lineups. And does he have he's going to, owners projections will say that he's going to be 18% owned. And it's like, dude, this guy could be 34% owned because people are going to press optimize and just fucking have a Josh Van Meter one-off in half of their lineups. And they're not going to realize. They're going to be on one of these optimizer sites. They're going to upload whatever it is. So it's like you could even take the projections and leverage that. So because I don't make my own projections.
Yeah, me neither.
Right. So we're looking at projections that other people are looking at. And they're going to be plugging into an optimizer to build lineups. But I know how 90% of people use optimizers wrong. So I know that there may be people playing 50 lineups into this contest that has 48 of their lineups have Josh Van Meter as a one-off. And I'm like, okay, looks like start Xing him out or only putting him in Diamondback stacks or stuff like that. So those lineups may not be bad, but I know that this guy is going to be over-owned. Then you also know what that means? The higher price second basemen are going to be under-owned.
Yes.
So now now I want to get Altuve in there, and now I'm getting Keston Hiura, even though he's striking out 700 times. Right.
But like you said, it doesn't matter. He only has to hit 2 home runs tonight. That's
right. But all those choices, like I went through, weren't based on who do I think is going to do well in the baseball game. It's what do I think my opponents are going to do too much of, and how do I what way can I exploit that?
Yes. That's ultimately what the game should be about. If you want to be better, I guess I should always put that caveat there. That's what's important. It's that, you're trying to figure out what most people are trying to do and how to leverage that with your lineups. It could be 1, it could be 150, but everyone has to make a certain amount of sense. That's the word I like to use. It's that if I'm putting it in this contest where I know Josh, a lot of these single entry fields that I like to play, where I know Josh Van Meter is going to be 65% because you can fit Bauer and 5 Dodgers in it, then that's the lineup where I either play Josh Van Meter in a Diamondback stack because I know nobody's going to do that, or I just don't play him at all. That's the type of thinking you need to have, instead of whether or not Josh Van Meter is going to get 6 points tonight. I don't care.
Right. And with the single entry stuff, you pointed out, I've said that I tend to be more contrarian in single entry, and it's one of those balancing two different things in your head at the same time. It doesn't mean that I'm playing all 1% owned players. It just means that because in single entry contests or 3-max contests, especially single entry, people tend to play safer lineups. Yes. Now, it's correct because in single entry, there tend to be smaller fields, which means you don't need the nuts. So you could play a high median projected lineup. You could play a 5-man stack. Play 5-man stack. You could plug in 5x into an optimizer, press the button, and play that lineup in a small field single entry GPP. It projects well. It's fine. It's fine. But so many people play that style of lineup, which means that the chalk stack is going to be even chalkier, which means that it's more leverage offered to you.
It's over-owned at this point.
It's over-owned at that.
It might not have been over-owned in the lotto, but now in this one, it's over-owned.
Right.
You know?
So then you're like, well, I'm like the SP2 that Freddie Peralta yesterday may have been like 76% owned in single entry, and you're like, fuck it, I'm playing a Cub stack. But it's single entry. Who gives a shit? This is the easiest path for me to get first place in this contest. Said all I pretty much need is Peralta to get blown up, because the Cubs, it's at 300. It's a 500-man contest, and I may be the only one with a Cub stack. I may be literally the only lineup with a Cub stack. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of my lineup, I X out Peralta, I stack the Cubs, and then whatever fit. Then I'm playing the chalk. Play the chalk one-offs. I don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think somebody came in Slack about 2 weeks ago, asked the same type of question. It's like, what do I play in the 5-5-5? Should I play the chalky? And I'm like, well, in my opinion, if you're playing single entry in the bigger fields, you should actually play even more contrarian. You should play where you're like not scared of your money, because we know everybody's going to play, the highly projected Trout one-offs, and the Ohtani one-offs, because like you said, they're trying to play safe. So those contests are to me, I've wrote a Twitter post about this, is that for me, that was the easiest way for me to get better. It's that I was understanding that so many people were doing these quote unquote safe things in non-safe, I guess NBA is the safest sport, but especially a sport like MLB, there's no such thing as a safe player. You got to get 4 at bats. You can go 0 for 4 any night. You can hit the ball hard 4 times and make 4 outs, So I learned that those were the contests that I should be playing, because since I understand that so many other players are playing this type of, lineup, it's so much easier for me to make a lineup full of 1%ers, but of good players. A lot of people think, 1% players must suck. They all must be horrible players. But no, they're only 1% because of how your lineup, how the lineup construction of an optimal build on that night is. So I think people also don't have that concept of that 1% doesn't mean that your guys suck. It just means that, hey, nobody's playing it because nobody understands that that's just, the type of lineup you want to make on that night.
Right. Gleyber Torres is 87% at shortstop. Yep. Because he's 4,300 and facing a garbage lefty and with the Blue Jays or whatever it is. And then you look and you go, well, overpriced Carlos Correa is 5,000, but still, the Astros are in a good spot, and he's 1% owned. Why? Because because median wise, Torres projects all above him, but it's not like Carlos Correa is a bad player, or like you see Jose Ramirez, like at third, everyone's paying down to third base, and it's a 12-game slate, and everyone's paying. They mispriced Eugenio Suarez or something. Mike Moustakas is 3,200 for no reason in Coors, or like some bullshit like that. Mm-hmm. And then Jose Ramirez is 5,800 for the Indians, facing a decent pitcher, but not great pitcher. And it's like, well, he's 1% owned. And it's like, but he's Jose Ramirez.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's just that no one's building that construction. So that's the reason he's 1% owned, not because he sucks.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think as you make more lives, and you get more experience, these are the type of decisions that you can tell yourself, yes, I know I'm doing the right thing. This goes back to, hey, I'm losing, but how do I know I'm doing the right thing? This is how you can tell. You can tell on a daily basis, or, even, again, I like to do it. You like to do it. I like to look at the quote unquote, the players that are winning all the time, because, if they're winning all the time, they're probably making good lineups, to study their lineups, If you're spending a little bit, I think more people should be spending time doing that instead of doing all the other stuff that I call useless, which is, looking up, box scores of how this guy did. The thing I hate the most, but also love the most when people talk about is this guy does so well against the Sacramento Kings. It's like, well, how are the Sacramento Kings 3 years ago? I can't tell you.
Right.
It's, that kind of stuff is useless to me. It's, but, people do it. I'm
right.
sure
His last 7 games against this center. And of course, 2 of those 70-point performances were from 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like what, like it's a team defense game. Like what, like it's not just like point guard on point guard, center. Like, dude, do you watch basketball? I don't even watch basketball, and I know this. What position is LeBron James? He's every position. So what do you? This team is bad against power forwards. Like, who the fuck's a? What are these positions? Is Draymond Green a power forward? He also handles the ball. Is he a point guard then when he handles the ball? But is Aaron Gordon? I mean, like so all those stats are fucking. Why are you bothering with that? The only reason you'd look at that is because people are going to look at that, and then you want to say what did they think is when it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the stuff. I mean, like you said, I don't know when it happened for me either, but like when you said, it clicks. That's the stuff when you start noticing that that's what you're doing on a daily basis instead of looking at all this stuff that doesn't matter. I think that's when you know that you've become a better player. You know,
probably because you're winning more.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can tell by your results, but even then, let's say you're in a bad streak, because sometimes it's really hard to tell whether you're in a downswing and you're still playing well. That's how you can tell. You know, I think that would be my biggest advice, to newer players.
Right. I look at my Marlins stacks from yesterday, and I look at the ownership, and I go, okay. I mean, they could have gotten there. I mean, Cooper had a good. I mean, it almost did in extra innings. But I look at the ownership. Once I looked at the ownership of the Marlins, I go, nope, I'm good. Doesn't matter. I know Noah struck out like 8 million people yesterday.
Well, yeah. I played a lot of but again, it doesn't matter. It's a one game.
Right.
It's a 1 game sample type thing. It's yeah.
Right. I take a look at the Diamondbacks and I go, okay. I look at the ownership, I'm fine. And then I take a look at the Yankees and I go, maybe I played a little too much of the Yankees. Right. I took a look. I mean. But that's it. That's all I could do, and then the games happen, and then you just move on to the next day, and then, or do you think to close a bit? We mentioned it slightly before that people get into the one slate mentality because we mentioned that they have unrealistic expectations, right? It's like, oh, these guys win all the time, right? You're probably profiting in GPPs. 50, 60% of the time, when in fact it's like 10% of the time,
yeah.
Right? When it's 10%. So because of that, they're like, well, I have $3,000 to play, and I'm going to play $800 tonight. And it's like, when you have like a quarter of your bankroll, whatever you're considering your bankroll on the line, one slate matters a lot, right?
Yes.
So like, I'm very conservative. I'm probably one of the most conservatives with my bankroll. But do you think that a lot of people, because people that tilt, I think that's a lot of the core of it. They start with unrealistic expectations, and then they play too much. And because of natural variance of, you could lose 10 slates in a row. And they don't understand that you can, so they're playing 800, like they're just not managing the bankroll correctly, which then is like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, now I can only think in the scope of one slate because
I have to win tonight.
I have to win. Right, exactly.
I hear
gotta
that
win.
a lot too. I have to win tonight. And it's like you may not win for 30 days. Like that, I think that's part of what it is. It's that part of it is the unexpected expectations for people, and then the other half is that I think it's just you have to. It almost sounds stupid when you say it something like this, but you have to expect to lose. It's almost like if you win, it's great, but you have to go into slate be like, I'm gonna lose again tonight, And when you win, but the thing is, if you're making these perfect, I wouldn't say perfect, but these good plus EV lineups every night, when you win, you're gonna get to the top. That Drew Dinkmeyer quote.
Right.
It's that you're going to profit when you are correct. You may be wrong 29 days, but on the 30th day, if you're correct, you are going to make up for it. And I think that's just the concept and the idea that most people need to get into their head before they start. It's very hard because they see these screenshots, but I think that's the thing you have to explain to them before they can fully understand it.
But a lot of people, you won't get it until it happens.
Yes, exactly, and that's the thing. Yeah, you practice makes perfect. Like I said, my advice would just be make as many lineups, in the dime and the quarter as you can. I mean, I think there are 5 dime contests. That's 100 lineups you can make. Just practice making good lineups in every single one of them.
Right, hand build first and then go to
an
optimizer, if anything. Very similar to poker, right? Poker, But when you first learn about poker, it's like, oh, poker looks exciting. You watch TV, right? You watch the World Series of Poker,
Yep.
right? It's like, oh, big hand, big hand. Don't realize that 90% of hands are just folded around. And you don't realize that playing good poker involves folding most of the time.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to get, oh, I have 5-6 suited. I'm going to play it against a raise in middle position. No, you're not. No, that's unprofitable. You throw it. Oh, I saw this guy make a move with it. Yeah, but out of context on a TV show. He's probably folded that 99% of the time. But he made a move. They showed that one highlight. Doesn't mean he does that every hand. So it's very similar to me of, what I was trying to teach people poker. And I wasn't really teaching people. I played underground and people needed help or something. Oh, can you teach me a little bit more how to play? I see you play well and you win. And then I tell her, I want you to sit down and I want you to fold for 6 straight hours. And they go, like, even aces. Just play your blinds and sit there and fold. So if you can't do that for 6 hours, then there's nothing I could do to help you. Because that's the one thing you have to remove from your game of, like, you may not get good hands, you may not get good spots, you have to be willing that you're going to have sessions, you're going to sit down for 8 to 10 hours and feel like, well, that was a waste of time, right? It's just like, but what a lot of people do 4 hours in is start forcing it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They start like, I haven't seen a good hand in so long that ace jack looks good to 3-bet. And you're like, just because it's the best hand you've seen doesn't mean it's the best decision to make at this moment, right? That you're 3-betting an early position raiser that it's one of those 64-year-old guys that reads a book while playing. It's like, dude, your ace jack is no good. Like, just muck your hand. Like, don't worry about it, right? But if you can't get past that, like, to me, those are the leaks. Like, you could be there are good players that have leaks like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we make mistakes too playing daily fantasy. It's not like everything. Yeah, exactly. Everybody makes mistakes. It's just you're trying to limit those mistakes and learn from them. That's the more important thing.
Right. I've made mistakes in MMA before. MMA, I made the most in the beginning and during COVID. I'm going to make unique lineups. And then I make, this lineup was duplicated 72 times. Like, how is that lineup not unique? Like, based on, like, I'm just looking through, and then I'm making unique lineups, and I make like 50, like 40 of them are unique, but it's like
zero win equity. Yeah.
No, they have win equity, but it's like, it's so, like, dude, I'm stacking the 2 biggest underdogs on the same, like, yeah, if this happens, I could win, but then then some of the lineups have other, like, it just didn't make sense. And it's like I left 2,700 on the table. I'm unique. And it's like, and I have no main event fighters. And I think it was one of the ones where it was like three 5-round fights.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, okay, well, how did this lineup get in here? Like, I don't even know. Like, this is like what's the win equity of this lineup? How could this possibly score that much? I mean, it can. It's MMA. You never know what's going to happen. But that's looking at things objectively.
Yes.
But so many people don't. I mean, the same way that when you're studying, like in Results DB, you're studying winning players, not winning lineups.
Nope.
So many people look, let me take a look at who won first place and take a look at the lineup. It's like, no, I want to take a look at Giant Squid's lineups. I want to take a look at Brick 75's lineups. Like, well, Brick 75, he didn't cash a single goddamn lineup yesterday. I want to look at him. Because if I could duplicate, if Brian would sell me his lineups, 150 every day, and I didn't have to do anything, I'd buy him. If he just said, I'll give it to you this for nothing, it'd be those are the lineups that I would play, and I wouldn't even have to ask any questions. Just give me his lineups, and then he could go and go with Pete Overzet and go off and club his fake horses or whatever. He could go have fun at his fake racetrack or whatever without government regulation and have all the fun he wants. Yeah. But if that's what you would do, isn't that who you should be looking at?
Yep. Yeah.
No matter if they won or not. It's like, I looked at some top players and they played like, they played this stack, that stack, and they played 3 stacks that scored 0 runs, and they completely faded the pitcher that scored 50. These guys, like, and then you start, now, one of them may have done that, but if you see a pattern, and you see across the board on a lot of, like, they tended to make these types of constructions. Maybe with slightly different stacks in baseball, right? Right? But if you see, it's like, if like last night's slate. If you thought, like, I'm gonna completely fade Glasnow and stack against him. Like none of the sharp players did that.
Yep.
Like no one did, like you couldn't find someone that did that, right? Peralta, even with the Cubs and Peralta, most people just jammed Peralta,
Yep.
right? But I understand if you did, at least it was a little bit less owned. But then you take a look at like how did sharp players treat the A's as chalk, and most ate a lot of the A's chalk, but faded a lot of the Yankees chalk,
Yep. Yeah.
right? And faded a lot of the Astros chalk, but they still jammed the A's. And then they paired it with a bunch of other stuff. Now, when I say jammed, it's still no more than like 30% or anything in 150 lineups.
Yeah.
But now there were some sharp players that did slightly different thing. And a lot of times you could pick them out. Because if you're studying players often enough, you know the guys. I know RBX88 is going to be, anytime I'm going to look at his exposures, it's going to be something that I would have never possibly considered.
Yeah.
Right. 80% owned, some guy that's 2% owned. And I go, okay, I guess and you're just wondering, you know, because obviously, like for 2 weeks, he missed out on his PGA lineups. Because sometimes you see that. Sometimes you see, why is everyone 100% owned? And it's like, no, someone had an upload error problem, right? So missed lock because they were having too much sex, right? That was RBX's excuse.
I
for
saw.
PGA. But there's some people that are like, and then there's some people that you could tell are like they just go hardcore on their projections. Because you always tell because they're very over-owned. Like it's like they're playing like a base. They're playing their portfolio as if it's one lineup. So you'll see guys that like, well, they have 80% of one stack on a 12-game slate. And it's like because they played all of that because it's the highest projected stack, and then they just rotated a whole bunch of stuff. Very high variance, right? Either they win, all their lineups got to go here or go down there. But based on their projections, that's what they do. And then there's some in between. And there's some that you see that are like very even. Typically like McLovin and Utica are kind of like they're playing 12. They're playing like every stack they have some part of, right?
Yeah.
Right. They're very diversified, everything. So you get a sense of how certain people play more than others. But still, you're going to see patterns, right? You could look at 20, 30, 40 different players' lineups on a single slate and see, it's like, what types of constructions did I make? Do I see any of that reflected across all of this? And do you see any constructions that you didn't even consider? Like you take a look, and it's like, I didn't even consider the double stud lineup. Yet it seems like half of them did double stud and went down and paid down for the Tigers. And that's why, and then you're thinking to yourself at 7:00, why are the Tigers so high owned? Right? And you go, oh, because people are playing double stud pitcher. And maybe you thought the Tigers would be low owned. And you thought you were going to do that as a sneaky thing, and it turns out that all the sharp players did a lot of those types of lineups. Now, it could have been the right decision for the wrong reason, but at least if you're comparing yourself to good players and not winning lineups, then you could judge that. But Peter, this sounds fucking boring, right? Isn't that the reason why most people don't do it?
Well, no, for sure. You know, I mean, all the stuff that we're saying, you know, to regular people, just sounds like it's almost like stupid. It's like, oh, you guys are just flinging things against the wall. You know, I'm just studying good players and copying their lineups. You know,
and then throwing a lot of shit against the right, and then not making any, just doing things that no one else is doing, and just throwing shit against the wall.
I think part of that, this is just my opinion. It's that part of it is just people want, you know, to feel smart. You know, I mean, obviously everybody wants to feel good, you know, but people want to feel smart. People want to be able to be like, hey, I picked this out because of X, Y, and Z. This is why I won. This, you know, and sometimes, you know, especially for me, that's not, you know, to me, I don't know why I won. You know, this is what happened.
I don't care why. I don't even care why I won.
Yeah, you know, so I can explain to you why I did the things I did because of, you know, ownership and leverage and stuff like that. But why the player did well, I really don't care. And I think that's the dissonance and the disconnect between, you know, good players and a person who just wants to be good at DFS but can't get that out of their mindset.
Right. When Akil Badu hit that home run that first day, I literally never heard of him.
Yeah.
And I had him in two lineups, and I literally, when I saw the home run, I said, Akil, but what the fuck's an Akil? But I didn't even know what team he was on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And then I look at, Tiger. Oh, I have some Tiger stacks.
Yeah.
And then I looked
mans,
and I like, he's the ninth hitter on the Tigers. And he happened to fit into 2 stacks. Way to go, Akil Badu. He's the bad guy. Let's go. Like, to normal people, you look at that. How the fuck did you not even know who's in 2 of your lineups? It's like, well, the projection, I played the Tigers, and did he fit into what else? Especially in baseball. I think we say this a lot in baseball because it's so high variance. That type of the whole like throwing shit against the wall type of like whatever fits fits more for baseball than it does for like basketball or football.
Yeah.
Like you're more likely to find actual sports reasons on top of the opponent reasons. Yes. Well, no one's going to be paying. Everyone's paying up for the Chiefs stack. So this Viking stack, which is also expensive, is going to be less owned. But I also know Thielen and Jeffers. I mean, they're in a good spot, and like you get a little bit more football analysis in baseball. Baseball's a lot of times it's just like, what is everyone going to do? Nope, I'm going to do this, and it's just here's 8 stacks. You just take roll 8 stacks. Let's go, bing.
Yep, yeah, and you just hope that's the night you pick. You know, that's really what it comes down to. Yeah, you know. To me, it's simple. Simple is better. That's when it comes, especially when it comes to baseball. Like I said, like you said, other stuff. In NBA, you have to be around till 6:55 to make sure your guy isn't out. But especially for other sports, it's as long as you understand ownership and you understand how to leverage your lineups to make plus EV lineups. That's more important than anything else. Don't spend your time, looking at BVP or all this other stuff. That's what you should be spending your time on.
Right, and then that's when you become successful.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, over time, that's you bink, I bink, we all bink. At some point, you're aiming for first place.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's the big that I've always said that's the biggest edge in GPPs. The more people that aim for first place, the less edge there would be. Most people think in terms of the edge in GPP being the dead lineups at the bottom, like people playing injured players, postponed games. To me, all the edges in that min cash equity. People playing. Yeah. I'm playing the 5-3. I'm playing the 5-1-1-1 with the chalk stack, 2 chalk pitchers, and 3 chalk one-offs. And it's like, to me, I look at that money and I go, that's the dead money.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially in the contest I play. Because in the contest I play, people aren't going to play injured players. They know what they're going to do. But it's that they're going to put their somebody's like they're on a winning streak. They'll put in a lineup. Hey, I'm going to put my cash lineup in here because I want to min cash and I want to turn 333 to 500 and. That's not how you win. You're supposed to turn your 333 into 100K by making a good lineup. It doesn't matter what the contest is.
Right, because over time, when you do that, you're going to actually lose money.
Exactly.
Okay. Peter, Boston Eagle 5 on Twitter. You every once in a while you have a screenshot.
Yeah. Every once in a while.
Yeah.
I try not to screenshot anything too big since the last one, so that's why. But every once in a while, yeah.
I don't think screenshots are bad. I just think that overall, if you follow DFS Twitter as a whole, it creates an unrealistic expectation. Because on a night that you bank, I don't. And then someone else, like if you're following 500 different people, most likely you're going to see.
Everybody wins.
Right. Someone's going to win on some night, and that's all you're going to see. It's like, oh, these guys are winning. It's like, well, on the night that Osama wins, Brick 75 has lost all his money, right? I mean, one of those 350 maxers. I mean, we see like a Hubro chunk yardage on Twitter. Always does those analysis of of the slate. It's like the 112 people, 150 maxed. Only 8 made money, right? Like,
and that's life. That's
right. And the 8 people that make money are the ones that came in first, second, and third. I mean, those are the only people that made money. So I don't think screenshots are inherently bad, but I think that's the roto tracker stuff, like the actual looking at the actual results over a long period of time. That's why it's like anytime I get into fucking pissing matches on Twitter, it's like I view myself as like, dude, I post my roto tracker and my full results. Yeah. So I'm untouchable to me. All I do is I show the truth. Am I trying to win $10 billion? No. That's not right. Am I a profitable player? Obviously I am. So that's all it is. If I make 50,000 this year, I'm happy. I don't need to bink. You've already made 50,000 this year.
Yeah.
So when do you quit the 9 to 5 job?
What?
When do you quit the 9 to 5?
the thing is, I don't need to quit it. That's that's what I keep telling people. It's that you can still do DFS on the side. You don't need 12 hours a day.
But how do you do the midday slates?
What? Well, those are the days I skip. Yeah, you still have to take time for other people. I guess that's a little bit of advice I would give. Always have something else other than DFS. It doesn't have to be another job, but always take a jog in the park, a walk with your fiance or something, something else that doesn't keep your mind always on DFS.
Unless you want to. I mean, if you're playing NBA DFS, you can't go on a fucking walk during the slate.
Yeah. NBA DFS. These days, NBA's DFS is unplayable. You got.
Well, it's playable. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Boston Eagle 5 on Twitter. Peter Lou. You're not on. Have you ever been on a podcast or anything?
No, I think this is my first one. Yeah.
Okay. This wasn't hard, right?
No, not at all. Just fun conversation. Yeah. Right. I mean, you've talked about this before too. I can talk this to anybody. Most people aren't just going to listen. That's
right, exactly. Most people in your life have no care in the world about DFS. So the only people that we have to talk to is each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
All right. So, it was nice being on. Thank you, Jordan.
No problem. Let me know. And tweet out when Add More Funds goes to Discord. It should be soon, right?
Yeah,
Matt's dealing with the Top Shot. He's doing all these Top Shot tools. But no, they're going to be worth nothing in a year. So
we'll see. I'm becoming bearish on Top Shot as well. But
you know me. I started day one as bearish.
Yep.
I started day one. Day one, I'm like, I don't even have an account. Someone apparently has an account, Blender HD. Because I got a tweet yesterday. It's like, oh, I see that you sold the Job Morant, Holo, whatever. I'm like, I don't even have a goddamn account. That's not me. I'm not going to be a sucker. I'm not holding any of this shit. Get the fuck out of here. It's like I got my index funds. I'm fucking good. I'll see you in 20. That's what I always say. See you in 20 years. This one slate mentality, right?
Yep.
Right. And oh my God, you got to buy the packs and whatever, and sell in the marketplace and flip and whatever. Like that's like, dude, I'll see you in 20 years, right? I'll put my shit in index funds. See ya. I'll see you. And if you make a lot of money,
I'm happy for you.
I'm happy. I'll still have $1 million. I mean, I'll still have plenty of money. So whatever. It's not zero sum. So you get a bragging right. Oh, look, I have $50 million now. I have $5 million. I'm happy with $5 million. Is that my goal? That's fine, right? I don't know why I have to justify that to you or anyone.
Well, no, exactly. As long as you're happy with what your goal is, that's really what
I'm doing. What no one else is doing, right? I'm doing the Top Shot ownership, it's like, right? Just like everyone's going to chalk, and I'm just like, nope. I'm getting my my SPY, my VOO, my index funds, and that's it. I'm good with that. So obviously, a lot of the stuff I talk about in the theory of daily fantasy sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. So if you want all of that, as always, because you're listening to the podcast, you should know this already. So go to theoryofdfs.com.